Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com, here to bring you another loadout video from the AMTAC shooting night vision course. We'll go ahead and start with some layers. The course takes place in basically fall up in North Idaho because the days are short. First half of the day taking part during the day, and then second half at night. So you get to work on all sorts of different skills, fundamentals, things like that during hours of daylight, so you can actually see what's going on, get familiar, and then as you transition into the night, you get to work on those same things under night vision. Really cool. I like the way that's structured. To that end though, northern Idaho in the fall at night gets pretty cold and sometimes wet. For most of the course, I was actually wearing this right here, which is the Active Flex jacket by Wild Things. Awesome, great layer, does a pretty good job shedding moisture, things along those lines. I did not have a hard shell with me on that first day, and pretty much rained the entire day. So to that end, I ended up wearing this. It's a little pretty lightweight Beyond Ventum ultralight, basically hoodie, and it's good for light rain and wind. I will say it did a good job more or less keeping me dry throughout pretty much that entire first day. After being cold and miserable far more than I'd like to, especially in the Marine Corps, say December 2001 over in Afghanistan, freezing cold, I don't like being cold. So to that end, a couple different layers I wore usually when it got dark. One of which being these, which are the high loft pants by Wild Things. Basically really easy. You can unzip the sides, slip them right over your boots, and to that end also mechanically vent if you need to. I've reviewed them before, they're pretty amazing. My boys call it my sleeping bag suit. And then also this high loft jacket, also by Wild Things. Really nice being able to throw this on when it's cold because immediately basically increases like your warmth and comfort. And sometimes I would actually just keep it open, basically being able to maintain access to all my ammo, things along those lines. Pretty clutch on those cold nights though. Next, let's talk web gear. For the course, I ended up running this right here. It is the Whiskey 2.4 turnkey chest rig with their Omni pouch. Basically med supplies in here. Fortunately, did not need them. And it is basically made for elastic pouches for magazines, ideally sized for 5.56 or thereabouts. I was not shooting 5.56. Shooting these guys right here, which are my high point magazines from my high point carbine. And I would occasionally throw like a Glock mag in here too. Ideal? No. They actually make specific ones for like pistol caliber carbines, things along those lines. Would have worked better. That said, it worked good. Occasionally we were going down to the prone, but it wasn't like super dynamic movement as far as going down, getting up, where you'd run into these potentially falling out. So I ended up running this, did a great job for me. Also with those warming layers, really easy to size it if I wanted it over my gear, or if I was wearing a high loft jacket, I could just keep the jacket open, still have access to all my ammo right here. For my holster, I was using this Fireland holster made for Arms or Red Dots, and it was on QLS, so I basically had a like belt loop adapter where I'd go ahead and just throw this thing on, I'd be good to go. And the way it was set up, it would sit outside of those high loft pants if I needed it to also. For my pistol, tried and true Glock 17, an old duty pistol, Gen 3. I eventually had it cut for RMR, so I have a RMR Type 2 on there, 3.5 MOA dot, I believe. Surefire X300, the original, not the Ultra. DG switch on there. Didn't use the white light too much because it was a night vision course. Occasionally use it a little bit as we would transition, basically right before we broke for dinner. So be shooting into almost darkness, break for dinner, and then come back and shoot under nods. So occasionally use it a little bit. Worked, definitely. But since I didn't have an IR illuminator or IR laser, and we're shooting under nods, I did have this RMR, so I could shoot passively, meaning basically bring this thing up, get the dot under night vision, be able to break those shots. I will say from that, definitely some limitations with respect to the RMR. one hand you have weather. So that first day was raining, and especially when this is sitting in the holster, basically it just collects water in there. Didn't have a big problem. It would bloom out some. Usually as soon as I'd break a shot, it would basically, under recoil, it would kind of clean itself up a little bit, but wasn't a showstopper by all means. Of course, ideally, this would actually be an enclosed emitter. Then you get rid of kind of some of those environmentals that you deal with an exposed emitter. Another thing that did come up though is, depending on how you're shooting, like where you're shooting, you may or may not have illumination. So especially that first night when it was raining, cloud cover, pretty much zero illumination, and even the rest of the nights because we're tucked down inside these trees. So it's really dark. So without passive illumination, even when this was dialed down to its very lightest setting, or dimmest setting, I guess you'd say, it would still sometimes basically wash out your target. You can make it work, it just made it more difficult. So what would happen is, if you saw your target out there, especially at distance, you would basically have to float this up onto your target to break your shot, because if you put it straight over your target, it would wash it out and you couldn't see it if there wasn't enough illumination. Because of my weapon selection, Glock 17 as well as my high point carbine, both chambered in 9mm, made ammo pretty easy. I was fortunate enough to have a bunch of ammo loaded up for me by G9 Bullets. While they make a lot of really high performance stuff, whether it is stuff for military law enforcement like armor piercing stuff, or stuff for self-defense or hunting, they loaded up some training ammo for me. So I'm 124 grain. Stuff worked amazingly well in both my pistol as well as a high point carbine. During the course, I actually used a little bit in my high point, at least for the first part of the carbine portion. Used some really slow subsonic. High point did not like it, didn't really have enough ass behind it to cycle it sometimes. It would get jammed up on the feed ramps, but using this stuff by G9 Bullets did an amazing job, and yeah, worked out great for me. And now we get to my weapon of choice for that night vision course. High point carbine chambered in 9mm. On here, I have a Lunar Concepts contour sling. Did a good job for me when we would basically transition shoulders, things along those lines. Pretty much just loosen it up, swim out of it, move back and forth between shoulders. Also on here, True North Concepts grip stop. Really like these, especially being able to put it on here and basically have it as a landmark. So when my hand's there, if we were shooting kind of at night as it was starting to get dark using white light, or after we'd switched to nods and our illuminator laser, once my hand was there, I was able to easily manipulate my illuminator and laser by streamlight, and definitely made it work. Really handy being able to essentially use it like that. In addition to that, I also had my brand new prototype Erector 9 silencer by Q. Thing does an amazing job. It's modular. Pretty much left all the baffles on there just so it would be quieter. And while it was quiet, which was nice, it also pretty much got rid of any flash, which was really nice. So rather than like a muzzle brake or nothing on the end of your barrel and just getting blinded every time you would break a shot, this made it to where there was no like external light that my nods were having to deal with. On here, I have a Scalarworks leap mount. On top of it, a primary Arms Red Dot. Leap mount does a really good job of basically raising this up. So I'm not trying to like mash my face with my PVS 14, trying to get behind it to shoot passive. And while I definitely like this and it did a good job for me, I will say, because of the illumination and how dark it was, it only goes so low. So even on the lowest setting, because it was so dark, sometimes, again, just like my RMR, it would wash out the target. If you had some sort of supplemental illumination, wouldn't be a big deal. Probably around town, wouldn't be a big deal. There's all kinds of like light pollution. But out there in the dark, it just wouldn't get dark enough to shoot passive sometimes for me without having to basically, it would kind of bloom out and float it up on the target to break those shots and get those hits. How'd this gun do for me? Why did I use it? Well, first of all, we'll talk about how it did for me. actually did really good overall. I definitely got a lot of reps in, especially manipulating the safety, as well as charging handle, and unfortunately clearing some malfunctions. Again, once I got through that initial, like however many of the subsonic, like really underpowered subsonic, this thing did not like eating those. Definitely a lot of malfunction clearances, but once I got through that, got to the 124, pretty much ran flawlessly for me at that point. It presented some challenges, especially on some of the further shots. I was shooting this, pretty much everyone else was shooting 5.56, so why did I shoot this? Well, one, I will eventually review this gun, and that course serves as a backdrop. It allowed me to go out and put a significant amount of time behind this gun so that when I review it, I can actually speak to it from a place of experience. But the other part of it is, here's the thing. Is it the arrow or is it the Indian? A lot of times we get wrapped up on, hey, I need this and then it's going to magically make me a better shooter. No, there's software and there's hardware. This right here is a piece of hardware. Me, my skills and ability, that would kind of be the software, right? So is it the arrow or is it the Indian? And to that end, being able to go through and shoot this and make it work. Because again, like, this is just a tool, like it's a matter of who's behind it. And it gave me the opportunity to get some really good reps in with this, create a backdrop for when I actually review this gun. And in addition to that, like reinforce that at the end of the day, it's about you and your ability as opposed to what you happen to have. So don't let a barrier for entry in whatever you want to do necessarily be your equipment. Yeah, sometimes better equipment is nicer and it can have the potential to improve you as a shooter, but at the end of the day, it's about you and skills you bring to the table. And finally, night vision. I was shooting with a green PVS 14 in this horribly painful skull crusher. Super cheap, basically comes with like most PVS 14s night vision. And I made it work. Was sent out this stuff by Shooting Surplus, incredibly grateful for that. And I'm actually gonna do an entire series on night vision, basically going through all the different, whether it's green PVS 14 or higher FOM, figure of merit, white PVS 14, bridged, dual tubes green phos, dual tube white phos, all that stuff. I will dive into it more, and I'll also bring you guys a standalone review, obviously, of this. But I ended up using this setup and it worked. Again, PVS 14, you don't have dual tubes, so you don't have that depth perception that you can get with dual tubes. Also, skull crusher, not ideal, not very comfortable. If there is a silver lining, it is lighter weight than like a ballistic helmet, and you can't actually throw a beanie on if it's really cold. So that was nice. Probably still would not recommend wearing one of these, but I made it work. That right there wraps up my loadout from the AMTAC shooting night vision course. Is this stuff all ideal, best in class? No, it's not. Did it all work?
Nice. Move on.
Absolutely. Remember, at the end of the day, it's not the arrow, it's the Indian. So don't let equipment get in the way of getting out and getting some good training. Go out there, get that training, get those good reps in. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.